Today, I would like to speak about the global economic impact from World War I into a possible World War Kusiri. Throughout history, wars have not only changed borders and governments, but have also reshaped the global economy in profound ways. The end of World War I in 1918 left much of the world facing severe economic destruction. The war lasted more than 4 years and involved many of the major powers of the time, including countries in Europe, Asia, and beyond. Because it was fought on such a large scale, the economic consequences were enormous. Governments had to spend vast amounts of money on weapons, soldiers, transportation, and supplies. As a result, many countries experienced financial crises, rising debt, and long-term economic instability. One of the most immediate economic impacts of the war was massive government debt. Before the war, many countries maintained balanced budgets, but wartime spending forced them to borrow large sums of money. Governments issued war bonds and took loans from other countries to pay for military operations. European nations such as Britain, France, and Germany accumulated huge debts during the war. These debts placed heavy pressure on their economies for many years after the conflict ended. Many governments struggled to repay what they owed, while also trying to rebuild their nations. Another serious problem was inflation. Because governments needed money quickly, they often printed more currency to cover their expenses. When too much money circulates in an economy without a matching increase in goods and services, prices begin to rise rapidly. This led to severe inflation in several countries. One of the most extreme examples occurred in Germany during the early 1920s. The German currency lost much of its value, and prices increased dramatically. People sometimes needed wheelbarrows full of money just to buy basic items like this situation known as hyperinflation destroyed savings and caused widespread hardship for ordinary citizens. The war also caused major destruction of infrastructure and industries. Large parts of Europe, especially battlefields in France and Belgium, were devastated. Roads, railways, factories, farms, and towns were damaged or completely destroyed during the fighting. Rebuilding these areas required enormous resources and time. Industries that once produced consumer goods been converted into war production, and after the war they struggle return to normal economic activity. As a result, unemployment increased and economic recovery was slow. In addition, international trade was severely disrupted. Before the war, global trade networks connected many countries through the exchange of raw materials, food, and manufactured goods. However, the conflict damaged shipping routes, reduced production, and created political tensions between nations. Many countries also imposed tariffs and trade barriers to protect their struggling economies. This reduced international commerce and slowed global economic growth. Another important factor that worsened economic conditions was the Treaty of Versailles, which officially ended the war in 1919. Under this agreement, Germany was required to pay large reparations to the Allied countries for the damage caused during the war. These payments placed an enormous burden on Germany's economy and contributed to further inflation, unemployment, and political instability. The economic pressure created deep resentment among the German population and played a role in shaping future conflicts. At the same time, the war shifted the global balance of economic power. Many European nations were weakened by the destruction and debt caused by the war. Meanwhile, the United States emerged as a stronger economic force. During the war, the United States supplied weapons, food, and financial loans to Allied countries. This allowed the American economy to grow while European economies struggled. By the end of the war, the United States had become one of the world's leading creditors and an increasingly influential economic power. Overall, the economic devastation caused by World War I affected millions of people and reshaped the global economy. Countries faced huge debts, inflation, destroyed infrastructure, and disrupted trade systems. The struggle to rebuild economies created long-term instability and contributed to further economic crises in the years that followed. These consequences demonstrate how large-scale conflicts can leave deep economic scars that last for generations. The economic impact of World War II was enormous and far affecting almost every part of the world. The war lasted from 1939 to 1945 and required countries to mobilize all their economic resources to support military operations. Governments transformed their economies to focus almost entirely on war production. Factories that once produced consumer goods such as cars, household appliances, and clothing were converted into facilities that manufactured tanks, aircraft, weapons, and military equipment. This transformation of industries was necessary to support the massive demands of modern warfare. During the war, governments played a much larger role in controlling economic activities. They regulated prices, controlled the distribution of raw materials, and directed industries on what to produce. Many countries introduced rationing systems so that limited resources such as food, fuel, and clothing could be fairly distributed among the population. This system helped ensure that soldiers at the front received the supplies they needed, while civilians at home were still able to survive despite shortages. One important economic change during the war was the increase in employment. As millions of soldiers went to fight, industries needed workers to maintain production. This created job opportunities in factories, transportation, and agriculture. In the United States and other allied nations, women entered the workforce in large numbers to fill the gap left by men who had gone to war. Women worked in factories, shipyards, and aircraft production lines, proving that they could perform many roles that had previously been considered unsuitable for them. This shift not only supported wartime production, but also had long-lasting effects on gender roles and labor markets after the war. While some countries experienced industrial growth due to wartime production, many regions faced extreme destruction. Large parts of Germany, Japan, and several European nations were heavily bombed during the conflict. Cities, factories, bridges, and transportation networks were destroyed. Millions of homes were damaged, leaving people without shelter and forcing governments to focus on rebuilding their infrastructure. Agriculture was also disrupted, leading to food shortages in many countries. After the war ended in 1945, the global economy faced the enormous task of reconstruction. European economies had been severely weakened, and many industries needed to be rebuilt from the ground up. To support recovery, the United States introduced the Marshall Plan, a large financial assistance program designed to help rebuild Western European economies. Through this program, billions of dollars were provided to countries such as France, Italy, and West Germany. The funds helped restore industries, rebuild infrastructure, and stabilize economic systems. As a result, many European countries experienced rapid economic recovery in the years that followed. World War II also led to the creation of important international financial institutions designed to prevent future economic crises. Organizations such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank were established to promote global economic stability, provide financial assistance, and support reconstruction efforts. These institutions played a major role in shaping the modern international economic system and continue to influence global finance today. Another major outcome of the war was the shift in global economic leadership. Many traditional European powers had been weakened by the destruction and financial strain of the conflict. In contrast, the United States emerged from the war with a strong industrial base, advanced technology, and a powerful economy. American factories had expanded greatly during wartime production, and this industrial capacity continued to drive economic growth after the war. As a result, the United States became a leading economic and political power in the post-war world. Technological innovation was another important economic effect of the war. Military research led to the development of new technologies such as radar, jet engines, advanced medical treatments, and nuclear energy. Many of these innovations later found applications in civilian industries, contributing to economic growth and technological progress in the decades that followed. In the years after the war, a global trade gradually recovered as countries rebuilt their industries and reopened international markets. Economic cooperation between nations increased, and many countries worked together to promote stability and development. Although the war caused immense destruction and human suffering, the Reconstruction period also led to new economic systems, stronger international cooperation, and significant technological advancement that shaped the modern global economy. One of the most important economic outcomes of World War II was the rise of the United States as a dominant global economic power. Before the war, several European nations such as Britain, France, and Germany were among the leading economic and industrial powers of the world. However, the destruction caused by years of intense fighting severely weakened these countries. Cities, industries, transportation networks, and agricultural systems across Europe were damaged or destroyed, leaving their economies struggling to recover. In contrast, the United States experienced very little physical destruction during the war and emerged from the conflict with a stronger and more advanced economy. During the war, the United States became known as the arsenal of democracy because of its massive industrial production. American factories produced enormous quantities of tanks, ships, aircraft, weapons, and other military equipment needed by the Allied forces. This wartime production greatly expanded the country's industrial capacity. Factories operated around the clock, and millions of workers were employed in manufacturing and related industries. The growth of industrial production not only supported the war effort, but also strengthened the American economy. By the end of the war, the United States had developed one of the most powerful industrial systems in the world. Another factor that contributed to the economic rise of the United States was its strong financial position. While many European nations accumulated large debts during the war, the United States became one of the world's largest creditors. Countries that needed supplies, weapons, and financial assistance during the conflict borrowed money from the United States. As a result, the American government and financial institutions gained significant influence in the global economic system, the US. Dollar gradually became the most important currency in international trade and finance. The leadership role of the United States in the global economy was further strengthened through international economic agreements made near the end of the war. In 1944, representatives from many countries met at the Bretton Woods Conference in the United States to design a new international monetary system that would promote stability and cooperation. This conference led to the creation of important global institutions such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. These organizations were designed to help stabilize currencies, support economic development, and provide financial assistance to countries facing economic difficulties. Because the United States had the strongest economy at the time, it played a leading role in shaping these institutions and the policies they followed. Another key development was the establishment of the Bretton Woods monetary system, which linked many international currencies to the US dollar, while the dollar itself was backed by gold. This system helped stabilize global exchange rates and encouraged international trade after the war. Since many countries relied on the US dollar as a reserve currency, the United States gained significant influence over the global financial system. In addition to financial leadership, the United States played a major role in rebuilding the economies of war-torn nations. One of the most important programs created for this purpose was the Marshall Plan. Through this initiative, the United States provided billions of dollars in economic aid to help rebuild European countries that had been devastated during the war. Nations such as France, Italy, and West Germany received financial support, industrial equipment, and food supplies. The program helped rebuild infrastructure, restore industrial production, and stabilize European economies. By assisting in Europe's recovery, the United States also strengthened trade relationships and expanded its influence in global markets. The strong economic position of the United States also allowed it to lead in technological innovation and industrial development. Research and development that had begun during the war continued afterward, leading to advancements in fields such as aviation, electronics, medicine, and energy. American companies became leaders in manufacturing and technology, and many multinational corporations expanded their operations around the world. This further increased the country's economic influence and global reach. Overall, the rise of the United States as a dominant economic power after World War II had a lasting impact on the structure of the global economy, With its strong industrial base, financial resources, and leadership in international institutions, the United States helped shape the modern economic system and played a central role in global trade, finance, and economic development for decades after the war. After the end of World War II in 1945, the global economy was in a fragile and unstable condition. Many countries, especially in Europe and Asia, had suffered enormous economic damage. Industries were destroyed, transportation networks were broken, agricultural production had declined, and millions of people were facing poverty and unemployment. Leaders around the world realized that in order to prevent future economic crises and conflicts, there was a need for strong international cooperation and institutions that could promote financial stability and economic development. This realization led to the creation of several major global financial organizations that continue to play an important role in the world economy today. One of the most significant institutions created during this time was the International Monetary Fund. The IMF was established to help maintain stability in the international monetary system. One of its main goals was to prevent financial crises that could damage the global economy. The IMF provides financial assistance to countries facing balance of payments problems, which occur when a country cannot meet its international payment obligations. By offering loans and economic guidance, the IMF helps countries stabilize their economies, restore confidence in their currencies, and improve their financial systems. The organization also monitors global economic trends and provides policy advice to its member countries in order to promote sustainable economic growth. Another important institution created during this period was the World Bank. While the IMF focuses mainly on financial stability and short-term economic support, the World Bank concentrates on long-term economic development and poverty reduction. In the years immediately following the war, the World Bank provided funding for reconstruction projects in countries that had suffered extensive damage. These funds were used to rebuild infrastructures such as roads, bridges, power plants, and communication systems. Rebuilding these essential systems helped restore industrial production and allowed economies to begin functioning normally again. Over time, the role of the World Bank expanded beyond post-war reconstruction. It began supporting development projects in poorer countries around the world. The organization provided financial resources for projects related to education, healthcare, agriculture, energy, and environmental protection. By investing in these areas, the World Bank aimed to improve living standards, reduce poverty, and promote economic growth in developing nations. The creation of these institutions was closely connected to an important international meeting known as the Bretton Woods Conference, which took place in 1944 in the United States. Representatives from dozens of countries gathered to design a new international economic system that would prevent the financial instability that had contributed to earlier global crises, such as the Great Depression. During the conference, leaders discussed ways to stabilize exchange rates, encourage global trade, and promote cooperation among nations. The agreements made during this meeting laid the foundation for the creation of the IMF and the World Bank. Another important goal of these institutions was to encourage international trade and economic cooperation. After major wars, countries often adopt protectionist policies such as high tariffs and trade barriers in order to protect their domestic industries. However, these policies can reduce global trade and slow economic recovery. Institutions created after the war encouraged countries to work together, maintain stable currencies, and create conditions that would allow international trade to grow. Increased trade helped countries access new markets, exchange resources, and strengthen their economies. These organizations also played an important role in preventing financial instability from spreading across borders. In an interconnected global economy, economic problems in one country can quickly affect others. For example, a financial crisis in one region can lead to reduced investment, declining trade, and currency instability in other countries. Institutions like the IMF help manage these risks by providing emergency funding and policy advice when economic crises occur. Over the decades, the IMF and the World Bank have continued to adapt to new global economic challenges. They have supported countries during financial crises, helped rebuild economies after conflicts or natural disasters, and funded development projects in many parts of the world. Although these institutions sometimes face criticism regarding their policies and conditions attached to loans, they remain central pillars of the international financial system. Overall, the creation of global financial institutions after World War II marked an important step toward building a more cooperative and stable international economic system. By promoting financial stability, supporting reconstruction, and encouraging economic development, these organizations have helped shape the modern global economy and have played a crucial role in maintaining economic cooperation among nations. Wars throughout history have often accelerated technological development, and both World War I and World War II played a major role in transforming global technology and industry. During times of war, governments invest heavily in research and innovation in order to gain military advantages over their enemies. Scientists, engineers, and industries are brought together to develop new tools, machines, and systems that can improve communication, transportation, defense, and medical care. Although these innovations are initially created for military purposes, many of them later find important applications in civilian life and contribute to long-term economic growth. One of the most important technological developments during wartime was the rapid improvement of aviation technology. During the early years of the 20th century, aircraft were still relatively simple and limited in their capabilities. However, the demands of war required faster, stronger, and more reliable aircraft. Engineers developed advanced engines, improved aerodynamics, and stronger materials to enhance the performance of military planes. By the end of World War II, jet engines had been introduced, allowing aircraft to travel much faster than before. After the war, these technological advancements helped create the modern commercial aviation industry, which greatly expanded international travel and global trade. Another important innovation that emerged from wartime research was radar technology. Radar systems were developed to detect enemy aircraft and ships from long distances, giving countries an important defensive advantage. The ability to track objects through radio waves significantly improved military strategy and national security. After the war, radar technology found civilian uses in air traffic control, weather forecasting, and navigation systems. These applications improved transportation safety and helped industries such as aviation and shipping operate more efficiently. Communication technology also improved significantly during wartime. Military forces needed secure and reliable communication systems to coordinate complex operations across land, sea, and air. This led to advancements in radio communication, signal encryption, and electronic systems. These improvements later contributed to the development of modern telecommunications. Over time, these technologies influenced the growth of television broadcasting, satellite communication, and eventually digital communication systems that are essential in the modern global economy. Medical science was another field that experienced major progress during the wars. The large number of injured soldiers forced doctors and researchers to develop new treatments, surgical techniques, and medical equipment. One of the most important medical breakthroughs during World War II was the widespread use of penicillin, an antibiotic that could effectively treat bacterial infections. The mass production and use of penicillin saved millions of lives during the war and later became a cornerstone of modern medicine. Advances were also made in blood transfusion techniques, emergency surgery, and rehabilitation medicine. These improvements later benefited civilian healthcare systems around the world. The wars also stimulated the development of nuclear technology. Scientific research conducted during the conflict led to the creation of the first nuclear weapons, which were used at the end of World War II. While nuclear weapons brought immense destruction, the scientific knowledge gained during this period also led to the development of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. In the decades after the war, nuclear power plants were built in several countries to generate electricity. This provided an alternative source of energy and contributed to industrial and economic development. Industrial production methods were also transformed by wartime needs. Governments required factories to produce enormous quantities of military equipment in a short period of time. To meet these demands, industries adopted more efficient manufacturing techniques, including improved assembly lines, better logistics systems, and standardized production processes. These innovations increased productivity and reduced production costs. After the war ended, these methods were applied to civilian industries such as automobile manufacturing, electronics production, and consumer goods manufacturing. As a result, many countries experienced increased industrial output and economic growth. In addition, wartime technological research encouraged stronger collaboration between governments, universities, and private industries. Scientists and engineers worked together on large-scale projects that required significant funding and coordination. This model of cooperation continued after the war and contributed to major technological developments in the following decades. Overall, the technological and industrial changes that emerged from World War I and World War II had lasting economic effects. Although these innovations were initially developed for military purposes, many of them later improved transportation, healthcare, communication, energy production, and industrial efficiency. These advancements played a key role in shaping modern economies and contributed to technological progress that continues to influence the world today. The possibility of a future global conflict, often referred to as World War Kusuri, raises serious concerns about its potential economic consequences. While the world hopes such a conflict never occurs, studying the economic effects of previous wars helps us understand how devastating another global war could be. Unlike earlier periods, today's global economy is highly interconnected. Countries depend heavily on international trade, global supply chains, and digital financial systems because of this interdependence. A large-scale war would not only affect the countries directly involved, but could disrupt the entire global economic structure. One of the most immediate economic impacts of a major global conflict would be the disruption of international trade. Modern economies rely on the continuous movement of goods such as energy resources, food supplies, and raw materials and manufactured products. Many countries depend on imports for essential commodities like oil, gas, electronics, and industrial materials. If a global conflict were to occur, shipping routes and transportation networks could be damaged or blocked. This would slow down or even stop the movement of goods across continents. As a result, industries that depend on these resources could face shortages, leading to reduced production and economic decline. Energy markets would also be heavily affected by a large-scale war. Many of the world's most important energy resources are located in regions that are already politically sensitive. If conflicts spread to these areas, oil and gas production could be disrupted. This could cause a sharp rise in global energy prices, increasing the cost of transportation, manufacturing, and electricity. Higher energy prices would affect both businesses and consumers, potentially leading to inflation and slower economic growth in many countries. Another major concern is the potential collapse or instability of global financial markets. Stock markets and banking systems rely heavily on investor confidence and economic stability. During a large conflict, uncertainty and fear can cause investors to withdraw their money from markets, leading to sharp declines in stock prices. Banks and financial institutions may also face increased risks if businesses fail or governments struggle to repay debts. In such situations, financial crises can spread rapidly across countries because modern financial systems are deeply interconnected. In addition to traditional warfare, modern conflicts may also involve cyber attacks that target economic infrastructure. Governments, financial institutions, and businesses rely heavily on digital systems